Hi everybody, we're going to start with your course pack on page 132 to cover the female reproductive system. We're going to break this video into two parts. This one will cover female reproductive system anatomy, and a separate video will cover physiology. So we're going to start with the organs, the primary gonads here of the female reproductive system. The ovaries serve as the gonads that make eggs or ova. So the ovaries and the uterus are actually held into place by ligaments. That is all that keeps them suspended in the abdominopelvic cavity. Let's now talk about the uterine tubes, otherwise known as fallopian tubes. You can see in this image how they come connected directly to the uterus at this point here, but there's actually not a direct connection between the ovary and the fallopian tube here. So let's talk about the structure of this fallopian tube in a little more detail. So the goal is for an ovum or an egg to be produced by the ovary. That egg should travel down into the fallopian tube and toward the uterus. Now, the issue is there are cilia inside this fallopian tube, and that's really all that allows for that egg or ovum to move along in the fallopian tube. And having said that, there are rare cases where an ovum has been lost out here in the pelvic cavity and a pregnancy has occurred. Usually it's not a successful pregnancy. It is a very dangerous one if it is housed outside the uterus, but there have been very rare cases where a successful pregnancy has been carried nearly to term with a baby being housed outside this entire reproductive system. All right, so having said that, let's talk about these finger-like endings here. Those are called the fimbriae. All right, and the funnel-like ending here is called the infundibulum. So this kind of flares out, you'll notice it becomes wider here. That's the infundibulum. Now, the main portion of the fallopian tube here is called the ampulla. And the point at which the fallopian tube connects to the uterus is called the isthmus. So the goal is, of course, for an ovum or an egg to be pulled by the current created by cilia down into this fallopian tube and over here to the uterus. The normal site of fertilization is, in fact, in this fallopian tube. Once that ovum has made its way to the uterus, fertilization is not going to occur that late in the process. So speaking of the uterus, that is this organ here. So let's now move to a different picture. You can see in this picture the female's rectum back here. You can see the uterus, and it is sandwiched between the bladder and the rectum. From this view, you can actually see three layers. The perimetrium or epimetrium is the outermost portion. You can also see there's a muscular layer here. That's the myometrium, and that's composed of smooth muscle tissue. And then the layer on the inside here is our endometrium layer, and that is squamous tissue. So just another view of the perimetrium or epimetrium. That is the outermost covering of the uterus. The smooth muscle tissue composing the myometrium, and then the endometrium forms the lining inside the uterus. I should mention that there are two layers to the endometrium. One is called stratum functionalis, and the other one is called stratum bacillus. So you'll notice on your worksheet, it is stratum functionalis that is shed each month during menstruation. It is the more superficial of the two layers. I'm just going to mark through here. That would be the layer that's shed off during a menstrual cycle. The deeper of the two strata is called stratum bacillus, and that is the one that forms a new stratum functionalis each month. So it would be deep to that functionalis layer, and so it does not get shed every month. Let's talk about this view here. You can see the rounded upper portion of the uterus here is called the fundus. We've seen that word before, right? With the stomach. The main portion through here, what do we call that? That region is the body. Also have seen that again with the stomach. And then finally, this portion down here these are the openings to the uterus, and of course that's called the cervix. Now, the reason that females need to have a pap smear done is oftentimes because of a virus called human papillomavirus, or HPV. The cells that grow in this area are not shed as quickly as the cells inside the uterus. This lining in here is what is shed during a menstrual cycle. So if the cells here grow more slowly in the cervix, then they are more prone to cancers like from the HPV virus. With the invention of the HPV vaccine several years ago, that may eliminate the need for many women having to have yearly pap smears, but that's still something under discussion. Nonetheless, that cervix there is the part that keeps the uterus closed. It only opens to allow sperm in about a day or so per month when a woman is ovulating. And that cervix is also responsible for keeping the uterus closed so a baby can grow inside during a pregnancy. This particular view shows many different parts. We of course see the vaginal opening here inside the labia minora. I'm going to go ahead and circle both of those. The labia minora are in fact a thin set of hairless folds of skin that not only enclose the opening to the urethra, but also the opening to the vagina. Okay, there's also a set of thicker hair-covered folds called the labia majora, and they surround the labia minora. Interesting to note that these labia are correspondents to the male's scrotum. We also see the clitoris here, which is actually corresponding to the male's glans penis. So had this been a baby boy, that would have grown into the head of a penis. And the rounded portion up top here that is hair covered is called mons pubis. The vestibule is an area that is enclosing the labia and the openings inside. Okay, so if we were to cover the vestibule, that would be these areas in here, kind of a diamond-shaped area. And then the perineum is labeled. I do want to mention that back here. That is this space between the vaginal opening and the anal opening. The reason I mention that is because it is often torn when childbirth occurs. There are greater vestibular glands in this vestibule area that lubricate the opening of the vagina. In fact, there are no mucus glands in the vagina itself. The only lubrication it receives is from these greater vestibular glands at the outside opening of the vagina. All right, so let's take a look. That covers up through page 133 for us. I will follow you over to the next video, and there we will cover female reproductive physiology.